gosh, thank you. All right, I just have to make sure this is the right height. So thank you to Lucas. Thank you to all you wonderful people in the audience. And Speakeasy, I'm incredibly thrilled to be here. So before I get started, I wanted to say that I just met Amitava about 15 minutes ago, and I didn't think we were going to bond over Auschwitz, but apparently we are. Because Speakeasy was kind enough to give a shout out to my first book, Three Muses, which takes a deep look into memory and the Holocaust and ballet. But tonight, we're here to talk about my brand new baby, Duet for One. And I love the idea of this theme, Let the Great World Spin, because I don't know about you, but in my life, the world is spinning a little too fast, and there's a lot of not control, whatever that word is. I'm not coming up with it. But I'm not feeling in control of anything. And somehow I wanted to connect this to the birth of Duet for One, which had a 20-year gestation. I have 2 children of my own, and when I think of a 20-year gestation, I get a little nervous, but that is what happened. So one of the things that I think is true of novels is they have multiple sources. So I'm going back to the beginning. I grew up in suburban Philadelphia and spent a lot of time in Philadelphia growing up. And I grew up in a house that was saturated with words. My mother was a copy editor, and in those days, galleys were these rolled up scrolls that would be unrolled across the dining room table. So half the dining room table was galleys, and the other half was unfolded laundry, because my mother much preferred to edit than to fold the laundry. And my dad was a lawyer who absolutely loved words. Interestingly, his mother became almost completely deaf at his birth. And so my father, he never said this to me, but his speaking voice was stentorian, and he loved words, and he had the biggest vocabulary of anybody I ever met. And I think this all comes from being the son of a wonderful woman who had a 6th grade education. English was not her first language, and she was virtually deaf. So in addition to books and words, my parents really loved music, and I'm the 3rd of 4 daughters, and my mother wanted a string quartet in the family. Now, in those days, you could wish for such a thing because the public school system provided instruments to everybody in 4th grade, and they had orchestras and county orchestras, and this was all part of the public system. So my 2 older sisters, one started on cello and one started on violin, so I had to play the viola. So that was fine, it was all fun. If you don't know what a viola is, it's a big fat violin. We don't call it that, we say it's the viola. You hold it upright, it's big, it's bigger than a violin, and it's clumsy, and it's very hard to get a sound out of it. And it's strung like a cello, which you put between your legs, but it's an octave higher. So I definitely like playing viola, but my life was transformed when I was lucky to have private lessons. I changed teachers when I was 14, and I fell into the hands of Max Aronoff. Now, Max was in the first graduating class at Curtis Institute of Music, and he helped found the Curtis String Quartet. I know we're in New York, and there's only New York in New York. You guys have Juilliard, but I'm really sorry we had Curtis and there was free tuition from when it was founded. So guess who got the better musicians? Curtis is still the linchpin of string music in particular, but also piano music. So Max, I went downtown and took lessons from Max. Max was old enough to be my grandfather, and he was somebody who had an incredible gift of the gab. He had a magnificent Italian viola, and his sound was like honey and molasses. I've never heard a sound like that before or since. He was also always had a pipe in his mouth, and we used to really worry that all the ashes would get into the viola F-holes, which they did. And periodically he'd get it cleaned out, and everyone said that the sound changed. So Max had the unusual, in addition to being an extraordinary raconteur, he had the unusual gift of being able to teach musicians how to practice. And even though that sounds normal, it's what you would do if you were doing a ballet warm-up or warming up for a football practice, but it's very, very rare in the music world where somebody can deconstruct the music and teach you how to learn it piece by piece. And not only did he teach that, but he insisted on hearing every week when you went in for a lesson what you were actually practicing. So he told me I had to practice 3 hours a day, which made me nervous, but with all the things he gave me to do, it was pretty easy. Definitely 3 hours were easy. So fast forward to college, I majored in music. I had a wonderful freshman year. I did a lot of playing and performing. And I thought it was time to change music teachers. And so I approached a teacher named Raphael Hillier, who used to play in the Juilliard String Quartet. He was on campus, and he had been coaching me all year, so he knew my playing. And he said I needed to audition to him, which was slightly curious because he knew how I played. I went in for my audition, and it was sort of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. He just ripped me to shreds. I was 18 years old, and it was pretty devastating. So let's just get back to that, let the great world spin. The great world was definitely spinning, and I was falling off it, and no control over this. So to make a very long, it was epically, it felt like an epic failure. And to make a long story short, I kind of harnessed all those words in my head and went to law school, which is pretty boring because many, many people like me go to law school because it's the default position. But I ended up having a wonderful career in social justice and working on issues that are of great importance, unfortunately, growth industries today, the American death penalty, criminal and racial injustice, and homelessness. So I want to get back to the sources of my novel, Duet for One. So we talked about music. My mother died very precipitously in 1999, and she was not somebody who liked to give compliments, but she had always kind of channeled to me that she thought I should be a writer. And the thing is, I thought I should be too, because I was reading like a maniac and keeping vocabulary lists, and I love writing and I love reading. So I started the floodgates opened, and all these words came out. I'm like, I want to get this on paper, but I don't know what to do. In 2004, I opened the New York Times and read an obituary of a Czech emigre pianist named Lilian Kallier, who's on the Curtis faculty, and she was married to Claude Frank. He was an Austrian emigre pianist. They were soloists, but they were also a two-piano team. And I read this obituary, and my first thought was, what is Claude Frank going to do? He's lost not only his partner, but he's lost his spouse, so that's like a double grief. And this novel burst upon me. I know this was 2004, and I know we're in 2025, so that gives you some sense of the time here. So that's the birth of Duet for One. Victor and Adele Pearl are a married two-piano team, and on page 1, Adele Pearl dies. We're at her graveside, and Victor has lost everything. But their son, Adam Pearl, who's in his late 30s, is a very gifted violinist, has a professional violin career, and he's sitting there going, Mom was never there for me. He's feeling emotionally bereft. He's really confused because he doesn't feel the grief that he thought he should be feeling. And so there are these divergent griefs about this woman, but the story is really Adam's story, because Adam has to find his way through grief and understand what his mother meant to him, but he also has to find love. His early love interest was, you'll be shocked to learn, a viola player. And the book is really his journey about trying to figure this out and why has he been in these sort of shallow relationships. So here's the next challenge. How do you get music on the page? It is the most ephemeral of arts, unless you're writing about ballet, which was actually my first book. These are passing things. They're not a book, they're not a painting, we can't hold on to them. So my feeling about getting music on the page was, first of all, don't use any of the vocabulary that anybody uses to describe it. But second of all, my solution to this problem, to the extent I was able to solve it, was to make it physical. So when Adam, he's not just playing, he's taking his violin out of a blue silk bag. He's rosining his bow. Yes, musicians do use rosin, just like baseball players. And his fingers are calloused, and the calluses matter because they're to affect what your intonation is. There are no frets on a violin. You have to nail the note through your ear. And he's playing his scale and his long tones, and he's in the studio, and he needs to have this sound ricocheting around his head to make sure he's producing the most beautiful tones possible. So I worked on this a long time. I had 2 agents vying for the manuscript in 2006. I signed with one of them, and she could not sell it to a publisher. And then a lot of years passed, and a lot of rejection, and the world was spinning, and I had no control over this book. So it feels like we had the good fortune of raising 2 children, and I had a great job, but this book was my kind of love and heartache. And it is incredibly thrilling that it's out, and I'm so incredibly grateful that you came to hear about it. There were a lot of rejections in those years, and my advice to young writers is usually go for 100 rejections a year, because God knows it's really hard to get an acceptance. So to finish up, in addition to just saying thank you so much to everybody for being here, the great world has spun again, and the books that were supposed to be here didn't quite arrive. So fortunately, Andrew, who's this marvelous producer here, was able to get his hands on a couple of them, and P&T Books will be here with book plates. So hopefully you'll order it, and it will come into your mailbox or your Kindle, whatever, and I hope you really enjoy it. Thank you a million.